So here we're going to talk about the fourth paper, fourth example paper. This assignment for this example paper was quite similar to the one that you all are working on. Basically, it is analysis, rhetorical analysis, and synthesis um, in response to synthesis type questions that you all are considering as well. Um, the emphasis on argumentation and persuasion wasn't as emphasized as the assignment that y'all are going to be working on with your fourth paper. Um, that's okay though. The point of this video today is to show you the setup, the introduction, and maybe some work in a body paragraph or two. So um, this student's paper was written in response to a synthesis question uh, having to do with the whole gun issue. Um, and again, I want to show you all something here. This is MLA format, so we have some placeholders here for the main heading. Don't forget to put your last name and the page number. Um, Center your title, indent your paragraphs, use appropriate margins, line spacing, font size, font face. These are all by now in the semester fundamental considerations um, for formatting our papers in MLA style. It would be similar in APA style with some notable changes, but generally, we're going to be doing similar things formatting wise. All right. Let's talk about this introduction first. This student I thought took a interesting, I don't know, a bit creative approach um, in terms of trying to grab the reader's attention, hooking the reader. Um, there's this sort of, I don't know, idea anyway of a genie in a lamp to grant wishes. It seems a little bit lighthearted, a little bit fun at first. But then as you go through the introduction, as we'll see, it's as if this student is confronting a particular reality, that there are all these issues and problems going on with society, whether having to do with racism and discrimination all the way to guns and gun violence. And sometimes it seems like that's the only way any resolution or any progress is going to be made on these highly consequential, highly polarizing societal and cultural issues. So if you were wondering, I know you've all been working on this example paper now for a couple of days, but if you were wondering what that was all about, that's how I took it. That's how I read it. Um, Here basically elaborating or in the student's words, what I was just saying. But this is what we remember when we were working on our introductions, sort of helper document. This is what we do in the first opening lines of our introduction. We grab the reader's attention. We sort of orient them in a particular direction in association with our topic or our issue. So, this is, I appreciate this. This is a little bit of a creative way. It's not the sort of standard. A lot of times students will put, an interesting quotation or some kind of statistic. This is an interesting way to begin to add shape and dimension to the discussion that you're going to have. Um, Here, starting from about this place on, and this, if you all have noticed, this is a very long introduction, um, which I am totally fine with. In fact, this student's paper is years old now, and I like working with it because um, this it wasn't just taking up room and it wasn't just a bunch of words on a page for no reason. The student was doing a lot of good work in this introduction. It's not to say that you need to have an intro this long. We've talked about this before, but um, most of the lines here matter in terms of, well, introducing things to the reader, in terms of situating the reader. And that's really what our goal, one of our main goals in the introduction is to do, is to help situate the reader into the discussion that we're about to have. So what makes these problems, things like poverty, racism, discrimination, violence, what makes these so difficult, um, is they're so widespread and so entrenched in our culture. This is the student, again, providing context, providing background. I don't expect us to account for every single consideration there possibly could be when it comes to our topic, but something more than one or two lines would be useful. The student continues here um, with some examples. So the student listed some societal and cultural issues, um, and then sort of addressed each one of them as examples of what they're saying, not because they're the focus of the paper. And this was one of the critiques of this introduction, by the way. It made it seem like, in a way, the student might be talking about all these things, but that wasn't the case. These were meant to illuminate the different types of problems and how they might be resolved, or what it would take to get them resolved. In other words, the student is trying to create an atmosphere of there are a lot of difficult things confronting everybody right now, and they're really hard to solve. That was the point of this. So giving everybody a bunch of money might solve poverty or resolve poverty. Um, and finding ways to place blame, which is fine. Again, I hope you know by now I'm less interested in the actual, points of view that you're adopting and entertaining, rather than let me see your thinking being put on display. Um, the student gets to a point here, I honestly don't know what it would take to end something like discrimination. People just need to learn how to love. I mean, I think that's a nice thought. I think there's a lot more to it than that, perhaps. But again, the student's not attempting to resolve these things, just showing how challenging they are. Um, and the student works up to this. Um, look at this, President Obama. See how old this paper is? It's a good one, though. Um, leading into See, the student used these other examples to show how challenging and difficult social and cultural topics can be. But now we're moving into violence, and eventually we're going to get down into talking about guns. This goes to the point of the paper. The student is building up, adding layers of context, adding layers of background each time, building up to an idea down here. Um, Maybe it could help to take a controversial issue like guns and discuss it, learn about each other's points of view so that we might find a positive way forward as a country, put an end to some of this violence. This really is the first sort of signpost of what this paper is going to be about. It's not explicitly stated yet. The student is not saying, I'm going to argue that, blah, blah, blah. Um, but again, I appreciated this. A lot of times students will just start with this line, for example, and forget all of this stuff. And look, you're going to have teachers, you're going to have peers, you're going to have people say that this is all unnecessary. Just give me straight to the point. These are differences in preferences, these are differences in styles, but I'll tell you this, a lot of times you're going to need a lot of this background and context in order to really maximize your understanding of what somebody's talking about, to really understand what page they're on, what point of view they adopt. Anyway, we've already talked about that in this class. Once you start to make known to your reader the direction that you're headed, or you start to get to your main point, then we start to make this move here, getting into our main sources, our main texts, our main visuals, whatever we happen to be writing about. Um, so if a person was interested in all this stuff that we just talked about, these issues and how difficult and challenging they are, um, you could just turn on the TV, the radio, um, exploring social media. In other words, the student is trying to make this transition from introducing the topic now to, hey, look, I have some really clear examples of this particular issue that I'm writing about. That's guns and gun violence. We don't just plop in there, here are some articles I have. We say that they fit this discussion contextually. And here we have the titles, the names. We after we have the titles and the names, we basically are, or we have the opportunity to say a little bit about each source. We're not sitting here and analyzing the whole article in the introduction. We're just letting the reader know here's one source, here's a sort of main point or its argument. We do the same thing with the second one um, here. And then we say something about what do these sources have to do with the topic and the issue that we're bringing up. Um, that's what this is going for here. This, if you like, this could probably be expanded a little bit. I mean, as long as this introduction already is. This was, I feel like, compared to the rest of the very lengthy introduction, this part handling the sources in relation to the topic felt a little bit brief, not a lot. And keep in mind, this is all the moves. What we're talking about here, what we've been talking about so far in this example fourth paper, are all the moves that we've been talking about here in our um, instructional materials on, for example, introductions, um, introducing the topic, contextualizing it, getting to this place where we introduce our sources, leading into our thesis statement, ultimately ending up with our thesis statement. Pardon me for a moment. And then we get down here to um, the actual thesis statement. Although it might appear on the surface that these points of views might not have much to do with each other, a careful examination. So we're saying here, it doesn't seem this is the setup for the synthesis in this paper. That was like the one of the main areas of focus. It's going to be important for you all to do that here in your fourth paper. We got the added um, task of arguing and arguing persuasively, but synthesis can certainly help in that regard. Um, but here's one way that you might set your reader up and set yourself up as the author of your paper to get into some of that synthesis, cultivate some of that synthesis. You're saying that you're understanding your sources don't seem like they have a lot to do with each other, but that's okay. You're going to illuminate how they actually both have something to do with your issue or topic, for example. They don't have to be at odds like this one's going to be, but they could. And I encourage students to go this route because it makes it helps bring important considerations from each source to the surface. When you put those before your reader and then you put them in touch with each other, that's one of the ways to really see what's going on with a topic or an issue. In here, a careful examination and analysis of each article's argument, rhetorical strategies, and examples. So look at this as a thesis statement. Remember the roadmap effect. What can we expect in the pages to come? We're gonna look at we're gonna be expecting an examination of arguments. rhetoric, and examples. That maybe we don't need three wishes after all. So as complicated and as consequential as all these topics are that we just talked about, maybe upon further review, we don't need a genie. Maybe there might actually be some common ground. And so this is going to be part of this student's argument here. That though we have these different sources and these different points of view, I'm going to analyze them, each source, and I'm going to show you these areas or this area where maybe we could find some common ground between them. And I think that's a pretty effective thesis statement. It's a little bit general, it's a little bit vague, not much. I wouldn't take off points or anything like that. I would probably make a comment to encourage you to try and be a little bit more specific here, especially if you've gone through and used almost two whole pages for an introduction. Yeah, go ahead. Be a little more specific here too if you need to. Take up some more room. That's fine. That way, I mean, your reader is going to be laser crystal clear on what's going on in your paper. Um, the summaries were also pretty lengthy. I took them out. By this point, I think most of you are pretty aware and comfortable with summary work, so we're not going to spend too much time on that. Um, it was an interesting way the student led into the summaries, almost like a topic sentence. I haven't been really teaching you all to do that, but if you wanted to do something like this, go for it. Prior to taking a closer look at either of these articles for the sake of helping determine whether or not some common ground exists in the gun debate, um, that's this is a transition, this is a signpost, this does a lot of work, this sentence right here. Lets the reader know, don't, not so fast. I'm not going to be analyzing yet. I want to briefly review each one to provide sufficient background and context. And so that's how they lead into the summaries. Very effective. Um, again, I'm not going to require you to do something like this. You can hop right into your summaries. This would be for some probably later class, something like that. All right. Um, we're getting here to the end of the example fourth paper that I gave y'all. Again, it's just a partial paper. We're sort of ending here abruptly because we don't have time to cover the whole paper in just a single week. So this will be the first body paragraph we're looking at, and I want to we're going to talk about this body paragraph with all of the knowledge in mind that we have covered so far this semester. One of the most recent examples being this document that we made for the class. Um, so call this to your memory or have it handy as you go through the fourth paper, example fourth paper, or as you watch this video, because this is sort of approach we'll be taking. We're going to look at here for starters, topic sentence. And look at this. Oh, I wish these little windows would go away. Okay. In terms of analysis, for the purpose of potentially determining if common ground is possible among prominent stances in the gun debate in America. Okay, so what is that saying? It's a very word salady type of lead in for a sentence. The student is announcing basically what they're doing here, what is going to go on in this paragraph. They're going to be taking a look at um, one of these sources um, for the sake of determining if there's a way for it, if there's some common ground. And what this does is this goes back up to the thesis statement. Remember, um, there might actually be some common ground between these points of view. That's what this student is after in this paper. So in terms of doing that, that's basically how this topic sentence starts. Let's first look at the rhetorical strategies and the examples that Cook uses in the article to make his argument A lot of times students would end right here. Let's take a look at the examples in the article to make his argument, period. And what I've been encouraging you to do in your topic sentences is your argument or the argument that what? Go ahead and reiterate that, restate that, even if it feels a little bit repetitive. This helps it make things clear for your reader. It helps make things clear for you what you're actually going to be writing about. A lot of times, ideas and thoughts like this, they just go assumed or silently sort of whispered in our own thinking instead of explicitly stated on the page. I'm encouraging you to do that. Explicitly state it. Don't leave it up to your reader to guess at or to remember. You remind them and also yourself. Um, so this student in this long example, at least as forecast here in the topic sentence, is going to be talking about rhetorical strategies and examples. That seems like it's going to be biting off a lot. I wonder if it will be more than and be chewed. Many of you will recall when you have made similar moves in your topic sentences or in the beginnings of your body paragraphs. I'm encouraging you to slow down and focus on one thing at a time. We shall see exactly how this student handles it perhaps next week in our second installment here of the example fourth paper. But just keep that in mind. Um, if if you include multiple items that you're going to write about in the topic sentence, it sort of binds you to that in terms of what you're going to write about in the rest of the paragraph. And if you're going to do an effective job at that, if you have multiple items here, you're going to have multiple items in the paragraph and you're going to have an exceedingly long paragraph. And that's problematic in a number of ways, not the least of which is you want to give your reader opportunities and chances to follow along with you effectively and to maximize understanding. Some of the ways that can be done is by breaking your paragraphs effectively, transitioning effectively in the topic sentences, and then as you move through the different ideas. Um, so just because a lot of students will say, "Well, I'm writing about the same article, and that's why I'm leaving it in one paragraph," and that's a fair point. You can still compose separate paragraphs for each of the points that you make about this source or your text or your visual or whatever it happens to be. And that's one of the points of having effective topic sentences. Remember when we go here and we were saying that in order to lay this in order to explain why AAMU is the best school around, basically in this topic sentence, here's one reason why. And then we analyze it and we discuss it. Here's the reason why. When we get to the second one, in addition to that first reason why, here's another reason why, and so on. And then we write about it. And then we say in a third topic sentence, not only is AAMU the best around because of this other thing and this other thing, but now here's a new thing. So this is the idea of transitioning. We remind the reader of the things that we just wrote about and we say we're going to add on to it now with this new thing. Um, so it's not to say that this is automatically or inherently bad or wrong or any of that. It's just to say it makes it a little more challenging because the tendency in students is to want to, they get to about this much space and they say, uh-oh, my paragraph's getting too long. I better stop. And meanwhile, they haven't fully addressed any of their points. So if you're going to do this strategy where you bring up multiple items that you want to write about, be prepared to write about them fully. Don't start to get anxious when your paragraph gets too long. Otherwise, again, the thing I'm encouraging is break your paragraph after you talk about each point. Start a new paragraph with a new topic sentence. All right. In terms of the actual substance now, all this, remember we went through really slowly this example. We started talking about all the different considerations of um, why and how we want to expand our thoughts in terms of rhetorical analysis. That's what's this student's going on here. Um, from the very beginning of the article, Cook uses an interesting strategy. He makes the media his enemy by appealing to the audience's sense of credibility, emotion, and reason. Look at that. Once again, we're smushing together multiple items in a single paragraph. Um, if this was the extent of it, that's going to be hard to pull off because now we're talking about all the rhetorical strategies. We're talking about multiple examples. This paragraph could end up being 3 pages long. Um, fortunately, the student sort of, gets out of it a little bit here um, by as transitioning or signposting that they're going to start talking about one thing at a time. So that's I guess one of the best ways you're going to be able to handle it if you start off like this. And this was part of my comments. I'll always recall. It's one of the reasons why I started encouraging students to break up the paragraphs effectively and to transition effectively is because there's a lot going on here and it's hard for the reader to follow. The bright spot here is this student makes pretty clear what's going on, as smushed up and bunched up as it is. Um, I'll tell you, let me show you what I mean. First, Cook says of the media, that they presume that answers to the gun debate can be understood through science. However, he goes on to say this approach is mistaken. The right of people to keep and bear arms is not the product of the latest research fads or exquisitely uh, torture data journalism, but a natural extension of Lockean principles. So, what is all this? This all sounds like a lot of Lockean principles and science and everything. Um, what the student is doing here, we don't have the article in front of us, and that's okay. We don't need it, but we can recognize what this student is doing. They are leading into, as we'll see in the second installment of the example fourth paper, they're leading into a particular moment in the article that serves as a solid example of the type of rhetoric that this author Cook uses in order to make their argument. Notice it wasn't just like a lot of us have been doing in our earlier papers this semester. Topic sentence, plop in a quote, say what it symbolizes, and move on. This student is taking a lot of care and a lot of patience. Here's one moment with a reference. Here's another moment with a reference. This student is taking a lot of care to lead into this example so that the reader knows why it's significant. Why does it matter? Why is it used by this author in order to comment on this right to bear arms debate? That's a lot more than simply saying it symbolizes a thing or it represents a thing. We're trying to go beyond that. So, despite this kind of chaotic beginning to at least this paragraph, the student gets back on track and begins to um, really sort of take the reader by the hand and say exactly what at least one of these single items means. And the student will go on, as we'll see, to try and explain how does it work? How does it operate? That's one of the big things we've been getting to um, all semester is not just why something is significant in terms of rhetoric, but exactly how does it work? How does it operate on the audience to have the effect we claim it does? All right, let's let that have that be enough for this time, and we'll pick back up next week with our second installment of this example fourth paper.